Break it down for us, Mark. What do you got for us today?
Well, I got a number of stuff I'd like to talk about. I know we had at our Rotary meeting, we had Mr. McAllister, our tax guru down here, and he seemed a little optimistic, but he made a couple of comments that I disagree with, and I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Let me start by saying that I don't have an MBA from Wharton School of Business or, Harvard or Yale, but I have been in this profession for just about 50 years now. So I've pretty much done it through from A to Z, and gone through about 4 of these recessions. So I'll give you my take. I work very closely with investors and major home builders, private and public. My firm specializes in acquisition and disposition of land for the major developers and investors. So I'm not active like you are in the single family arena. I did that for many, many years, but I think we're currently in a recession. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the unemployment numbers and where the market is right now, we have to call it a recession. I don't think we're in a depression with real estate, nothing like the big one we had in 2008, 2007. Home construction has plunged in April to its lowest level in about 5 years. Groundbreaking last April dropped 30%. This is probably the lowest level since 2015. Construction new homes dropped 25% in the same period. Some of the builders I'm in touch with, more of your private builders, are kind of on a holding pattern right now because they're investor driven that provide the equity for them. And a number of them are sitting on the sidelines and just want to see, how quickly the economy recovers. Public home builders, they seem to be a little more optimistic. They're sitting on a boatload of cash, and they are looking for some really good opportunities, especially the luxury market. The move up hasn't been impacted as much, especially areas along San Diego Coastal and Orange County in some areas. I was talking to the vice president of Brookfield Homes the other day, and they had over 200 people one day on one of their projects. So he says, and our sales are good considering the circumstances. So it kind of depends who you talk to. I think, I'm a little concerned about how quickly we will recover, and I'll get into that shortly. Home qualifying is a little more challenging now. You mentioned some big lenders out there, and some of those lenders out now, from what I read, are looking for close to a 700 FICO score. So you've got to have pretty good credit right now. And these banks now, if you're working, these banks now are calling your employer up until the day of funding, the day before funding, just to see if you're still working. So that's changed. A little more challenging, but if you've got good credit, you have cash, could be some good opportunities out there. I'm not as optimistic about how quickly we're going to recover, and let me explain my feeling on that. First of all, there's 3 businesses that I think are going to be impacted, and I'll go through actually 4. Movie theaters could be a thing of the past. They are impacted now. You can't get in them, and I think with everybody staying home right now, and these production companies are now streaming directly rather than going through, first run movies at the theaters. So people are getting used to that, and I think we're going to see more of those first run streaming right into your home. So I think that is definitely going to impact the movie industry. Brick and mortar. Some of these big brick and mortar retailers are in trouble. J.C. Penney, Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, Pier 1, Victoria's Secret. They've all filed BK and trying to get reorganized. Your office space is another area I think is going to get hit. One employer I was talking to has got about 20,000 square feet. All his employees are home right now, and his business has not been impacted. And he's excited about that. And he said, listen, when my lease is up, I'm not going to renew it. I don't need 20,000 square feet. My guys are doing great at home, and we'll definitely downsize. I think we're going to see more of that. So I think a lot of these office spaces could be turned into, maybe multi-use, multi-tenant, mixed use. That's something we need to keep an eye on. Some of the smaller residential income properties, I think, could be impacted if the landlord doesn't get some relief and some of these tenants continue to stop paying rent. They could be in trouble. So we're keeping an eye on that. I do have a couple of very deep pocket investors, and they're waiting. They think there's going to be some very good opportunities coming up later this year and into 2021, more in the commercial sector. Mm-hmm. I'm more optimistic in the residential sector. Everybody has to have a home to live in. So, like I said, if you've got good credit and you've got the cash to put down, I think you're going to do fine. I know here in Carlsbad, where I live along the coast, sales have been pretty brisk. So that's a good sign. This is interesting. You started off saying that some people are making more money staying home than working. And that's true. We've seen a number of people that are don't have the incentive. They're saying, why should I go back to work? My brother calls it catch-22. I call it socialism. When you think about it, So again, fortunately, it's temporary, and at some point they need to go back to work if their work is available. But we are going to see some high unemployment numbers for a while. So I'm just not as optimistic about seeing a quick recovery. Third quarter, I think some businesses are going to take a little longer to recoup. One of them are your restaurants. Yes, they're all starting to open up right now, but the way the spacing criteria is, you're probably only going to get about half the amount of people that they were accustomed to. So that's less revenue. And a lot of those employees won't be coming back to a job. And one employer I was talking to said, you can't just turn the lights on and say we're open. He said that there's a whole set of protocol you have to go through, before we can open. And you got to do all the face masks and the spacing. I got to move tables around. I got to get rid of tables. So, and he says, and my employees took off. Some of them went back east to go home with their folks. So, I don't know if I can get them back. I may have to hire new people. So these are things that, that are going to slow, I think, the recovery down a little bit. But the silver lining is we've got the clearest skies we've ever seen in decades. So hopefully that's not a bad thing. But lastly, though, getting back to Mr. McAllister, our tax collector, he just said a couple of things. He thought things would be back to normal, our employment would get back down to where it was, and unfortunately, I think he's a little overly optimistic on that. I don't really see any great recovery in the third quarter. I think we'll see some good, much better numbers in the fourth quarter, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I think with this virus, with this COVID-19, I don't think we're going to see the old norm, if we ever see it at all, until we get a vaccine. And once we have a proven vaccine out there, everybody's going to feel good about getting out, spending money, buying things. So the commercial sector, it's going to be very interesting. I think there's going to be some great opportunities out there. But residential, I'm more optimistic, like you.
Well, all right.
So if you have any questions,
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer.
Well, all right. Well, let me get into a little bit of what you were saying there. So the not as optimistic with the commercial. So the movie theaters, brick and mortar, office space. I'm hearing a lot of the same thing on the commercial side. A lot of the businesses are innovating. So you have the streaming movies, you have streaming music, all that type of stuff is going to continue to happen. And I think that's important. But that is going to have a major impact on the theaters. And that those very well, having to spend $20 to go watch a movie. I don't remember the last time I've gone to a movie. There just hasn't been a movie worth spending $20 to go watch. Brick and mortar. I think tying that into basically office space. Brick and mortar, the businesses have to be able to come back. So that will be very interesting to see. I have a feeling you're probably correct largely on that. Office space, I've already heard the conversations. I have, just in the real estate realm, I know that we're going to go from a 3,000 square foot office down when the lease expires here. I know quite a few other major agents, large top producing agents in San Diego that have already shut down their doors and like, we're out. No, thanks. We don't need to spend this money. We're more productive at home. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, people just walking away from leases. Have you started to see any of that, just walking away from leases?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not too much. Well, my daughter's a good example. She's at this private university in Miami, and she's wrapping up her master's in occupational therapy. And they closed the campus down. And I don't think my daughter's an exception, but a lot of schools, as you know, most all schools went online. And she had a lease that took her through the end of September. And she's back home now with us, taking classes online, and they don't know when the school's going to reopen. So I negotiated a buyout. It wasn't really a buyout, but I helped her negotiate a pretty much buyout on her lease. Mm-hmm. And the landlord agreed to accept the security and the last month's rent and let her walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she saved some money there. So again, she's not an exception. I think a lot of people are doing, a lot of kids, a lot of students who had leases, are in this situation. So that's just one example.
Yeah. Well, that ties into the fourth point that you brought up with that would be the residential investment properties, their income properties. If those are starting to become vacant and there isn't a high prospect for those coming back, those are going to get unloaded, put back on the market for sale potentially. What are you seeing in that regard? Do you have some more thoughts to share on that?
I haven't seen anything come up yet, but in some investors I've been talking to, I read this national report that one of my investors gave me, and that was one of the areas that they touched on, was that we're going to see some opportunities. They hit on all the ones I discussed, and that was interesting about some multifamily properties. We also have to think about some of these landlords who have other properties or assets somewhere else that are suffering right now, and they need to unload some properties maybe for cash. So if they've got a piece of property that's not performing, and you've got tenants that aren't paying, or trying to negotiate, a smaller amount, you could see some flexibility there. I currently have an apartment site land in escrow, and this whole COVID-19 has slowed things down. All your agencies, your government agencies at cities are closed, and they're working out of their homes right now. So we had a due diligence period for him to investigate before he went hard with money. And that was supposed to happen in 45 days, and we're into our 90th day now. Because it's so slow to get the cities to respond, to all your questions, or if you turn in a design for a building, they're just not there to help you anymore, and it takes weeks instead of days. So fortunately, I'm a very sophisticated and patient seller. So he's been granting us the extension. So we're not the only one in that situation, that's for sure.
Right, right. I think what will be interesting to see with the investment properties that people have, the one of the big differences between 2008 and what we have today is every level of government stepped in immediately: federal, state, county, city, whether it be for small businesses, whether it be homeowners, whether it be renters. And so those, I know some of those are set to expire at the end of the month. I know that some of them have been extended into June, July, and I think there's even some LA, I think, is into August at this point. So I think as long as renters are going to be continued to be protected by city, state, county, whatever it is, government, figuring out how they're going to stack that on the back end of somebody's lease, that could forego the flood of properties coming on the market due to renters not being able to pay. At some point, the unemployment rate will come down, whether it be Q3, Q4 into 2021, and people need a place to live. So that, I think that if the city, if the county, if the state can't continue to provide that coverage for renters, and basically if they're going to miss 2 months, 3 months worth of rent, whatever it may be, to extend the lease that long, or however they're working that, if they're going to be able to continue to do that, I don't think we're going to see a massive fire sale of investment property. If that protection expires and all of a sudden come July 1st, everybody in San Diego is told, pay rent, there's going to be a large number of people that are going to simply not be able to make that happen. They're going to be out. And then the question is, are the owners, the investors, going to be able to bring in another tenant, or are they going to be sitting there with a property for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and ultimately have to unload it? What are your thoughts on that?
No, they're good thoughts. I can't argue with that. There's been talk out there about Congress extending the benefits to the end of the year for unemployment. They're talking about it, whether it's going to go through or not, but there is going to be another stimulus package. I told my daughter, I said, honey, you're going to be paying for all this, Yeah. Unfortunately, millennials, but we had no choice. The government had no choice but to help out and to, we're trillions into debt right now. One of the few countries, if any, that can print money. We need it, and we're doing it. But yeah. We have to help people out. We got to get people back to work. I just don't think it's going to be a real quick recovery. I just think it's going to linger for a while. Yes, I think the unemployment numbers are going to come down. I don't know if we're going to see 3.5% unemployment anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that we're going to be into 2021 at least before we get down to that level.
I agree. And if this thing, it does take longer to recover, then all the more reason why Congress should, approve another stimulus package.
Yeah, I think at some point they will. We'll see how that goes. I think that
We'll see.
It will be interesting to see. At some point, all the truth and all the data comes out. It is, at this point, people, organization groups, good luck on hiding something. There is just entirely too much online. And so I think that once the data set's large enough, and the people that are trained to do this can look at the data, can look at the health data, everything that I'm seeing is the mortality rate is less than the flu. So is that the actual case? I'm not an immunologist. I do have 2 master's degrees in science, but I'm not an immunologist. So it'll be interesting to see, in terms of what I think needs to happen. I think there's 2 things. First, Congress has to take action and pass some sort of liability protection for businesses, whether that be for professional sports teams to have fans, whether that be for universities to have students come back, restaurants to go to more than 50%, whatever it may be. These businesses are going to have to be protected from this. The ambulance chasing attorneys are already lining up and getting ready to sue anyone and everyone that they can if anyone possibly becomes ill because they went into a shop or a restaurant. So I think step 1 of this has to be the liability. And then at that point, once that's in place, I think you're going to see a governor from one of the 50 states, maybe Florida, maybe Georgia, maybe Alabama, who knows? They're going to find someone is going to have to stand up when the liability protection is placed and say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, here's the deal. If you're over 75 and you need shelter in place, sorry, we hit the pause button for 3 months for you. We can't continue doing this. If we hit this for another 2 months, when we hit the restart button again, there's going to be nothing left. So I think that guidance is going to have to be given. They're going to have to tell people that are 55 to 75, if you have underlying conditions, you better be darn well aware of what you're doing. You better shelter in place, potentially wearing masks, social distancing, etc. I think once you get under 40 to 55, underlying conditions, same type of advice. Under 40, there's very little evidence that this is having an impact. There are obvious one-offs. There are horrific stories of people that are losing their life over this. That is a one-off. That is less than 1% of 1%. So I think that's basically what's going to have to happen. The sooner that happens, I think the faster the economy is going to get going again. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on the age. My wife is a nurse practitioner at UCSD, and she's in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably a little more informed, as a non-professional. Mm-hmm. But the COVID-19 is hitting everybody, all ages. Yes, if you've got chronic conditions, if you've got some underlying chronic condition, regardless of your age, you definitely are impacted. Your immunity system definitely weakens naturally as you get older. So yes, the elderly is more fragile and they need to be protected. But getting back to owners of restaurants, for instance, you're absolutely right. A lot of them, they want to open, they need the money, and they want to get back to business as usual, but they've got a huge liability if anything happens. And that's why, and we've all read in the paper, a lot of them are not ready to open. They're saying, I'm really concerned because if somebody comes in here and I haven't done everything I'm supposed to do, and they come in and they're not wearing a mask or something, and they get COVID-19, I could be sued, and then they're going to shut me down. Or too many people come in. There was a place in Mission Beach, a restaurant, overcrowding last weekend. They opened up, health department shut them down.
Mm-hmm. That was compliant, right? Yeah,
so you've got a lot. Yeah, you've got a lot of employers out there that are being very cautious too, before they open up. So that's why I say this thing isn't going to turn around like we saw it anytime soon.
Yeah.
It'll get better. No, the unemployment numbers definitely will come down. I'm still I've been in the residential profession for 50 years, so you have to be optimistic to survive this long. Yeah. But in all my experience, I'm optimistic about the residential market. Mm-hmm. San Diego's still a great place to live. People want to be here. So.
Yep, absolutely. All right.
Well, I'm not overly concerned there. Okay.
Yep. No, I got you. All right. All good points. I enjoy the conversation for sure.